Welcome to Access for All, where the Access for All team of Wheelchair Boy and the Stone of Truth and me, Robert Gorski, dissect and explain different aspects of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA for short. Today's program is called Coordinate Your Access, and today's key word is Accessibility Coordinator. Let's start with taking another look at the great hand of the ADA, whose 5 fingers adroitly point to the 5 areas of community life covered by the ADA. Today's program will focus on the area pointed to by the index finger, public services, which is covered by Title 2A of the ADA. Title 2A applies to local governments, which means everything from state government down to the smallest municipal government. This part of the ADA describes a wide variety of obligations for accessibility that all local governments must work toward achieving. Further, federal regulations for Title 2A specify those obligations in great detail. One of these specifications refers not so much to the goal of accessibility, but to the means to achieve that goal. A small provision requires every local government with 50 or more employees to designate someone to coordinate the effort to comply with the ADA. The law recognizes that local governments are complex and have far-flung activities, and that achieving accessibility is a complicated, long-term, and expensive process. It is not enough just to say a government is obligated to achieve accessibility or to hold a mayor or city manager ultimately responsible. There needs to be an accessibility coordinator, a person available on a day-to-day basis to explain, to inform, to promote, to cheerlead, to needle, and to bring people together to work cooperatively. For the city of Pasadena, that person is my guest today. Her name is Ali Everett, and her title is Accessibility Issues Coordinator, City of Pasadena. Ms. Everett has over 20 years of experience working and volunteering on disability issues. As far back as her college years at UC Santa Barbara, Ali participated on that school's ADA Advisory Board and chaired the Commission on Disability Issues. Later, at Syracuse University, Ali co-directed the Disability Law Center and was a member of the Chancellor's Task Force on Disability, the Beyond Compliance Coordinating Committee, and the Disability Cultural Center Advisory Committee. Welcome, Ali, to Access for All.
Thank you, Robert. I'm happy to be here today.
Okay.
Appreciate you inviting me to speak.
Okay, briefly, what is a typical workday like for the city's Accessibility Issues Coordinator?
That's a great question. I think the easy answer is there are no 2 days that are alike, really. So a typical workday has me touching a lot of different accessibility issues, including, for example, today I started my day out in the community looking at potential ramp location in the public right-of-way, and I'm going to finish it up at the end of the day with staff training on service animals.
So you don't just sit at a desk waiting for someone to call or send you an email?
I do not just sit at my desk waiting for somebody to call or send me an email, although I do receive many calls and emails, and I do respond to those.
Now, do you have any role in helping the private sector, businesses in Pasadena, comply with the ADA?
That's a really good question, Robert. My role is to ensure compliance with the city's, ADA compliance with the city's program, services, and activities under Title 2A of the ADA, and places of public accommodation that fall under the business sector are covered by Title 3. So I do not assist with that process. And the city actually doesn't enforce the ADA, but the city's building official does enforce the California Building Code Chapter 11B, which mirrors the ADA standards for accessible design. So in that respect, the city is helping to facilitate accessibility in our business community.
Okay. Very good. Well, I understand that California is kind of ahead of many others. I shouldn't say most, but many other states in its own state code on accessibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have much to do with the public sector or private sector. So let's turn to Title 2A, which is called Public Services. Now, I can understand how the word public refers to city, county, and state governments, but why the word services? That seems to exclude buildings and other government facilities.
That's a good question, Robert. I think the easiest answer to that is that the services that the city provides take place within the city facilities. So those facilities need to be accessible in order for the public to be able to access the services. So even though it says public services, the larger scope is access to the programs, services, and activities of the public entity, which includes ensuring that the facilities are accessible.
Okay. And by facilities, we mean City Hall, we mean the library, and what other kinds of things? It's not just buildings, right? It's other kinds of things like parks or whatever? Or?
Right. So when you're talking about facilities, it's any building that's owned by the city, also parking structures, parks in the public right of way.
Okay. Now, how about something like the city's power plant? Do you go down there and make that all accessible?
As much as I would love to spend a lot of time at the city's power plant, that is not something that I do because it's not accessible to the public.
To the public, okay.
Correct.
So again, let's go back to the title of 2A. It's public services.
Correct.
The services of the city that are available to or used by the public.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to another question. Now, under Title 2A, any new facility of the city that the city constructs has to be accessible or not? Because we're talking about, it's called public services, so does a new facility have to be accessible?
Right. So under the ADA, newly constructed facilities have to be constructed in full compliance with the current accessibility standards, which is right now the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design.
Okay. And we have an example of that with you were mentioning Robinson Park is a good example.
Yeah.
I think we have a photograph of that, of the facade of Robinson Park. Now, this is not the Robinson Park that I remember seeing for many years.
Yeah, so this is a great picture of the front entrance to the Robinson Park Recreation Center, which was just recently renovated. But in that renovation, it was torn down and rebuilt, which means that it has to comply with the new, with the current standards as new construction. So that was really great for our community because the previous building did not have access to the second floor. So now that part of the facility is fully accessible to people with disabilities. And the next phase of the project will be provide the opportunity to upgrade the pool and locker room area so it is accessible.
Now, I remember for many years with Robinson Park, as it used to be, I should say Robinson Park Center, because there is a difference. The Robinson Park Center was sort of a split level, and there were sort of like two parts of it, and there were like 4 or 5 stairs between the two parts. And if you couldn't do the stairs, you had to go out the entrance door, around the building, to the outside, take an outside ramp up to the slightly higher level. Is that still the case?
Right, so as part of the renovation of Robinson Park Recreation Center, that longer route has been eliminated. So the second floor, which is just about a half a flight up from the first floor, has a ramp that's available on the interior of the building adjacent to the stairs.
Inside?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go there.
You have to go check it out.
As soon as we're finished, I'm going to go there and
Okay.
go up the inside ramp. Okay, so new buildings have to meet the ADA accessibility guidelines. Now, are there any examples of the city going above and beyond the mere minimum standards?
Yeah, Robert, a really fun example of that is Reese's Retreat at Brookside Park. Have you had a chance to go there yet?
I've been there a couple of times, yes, and I think we have some photos of it.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, there we go. I think it's commonly referred to as Pirate Park, so you can see some
I see
components.
cannonballs.
Yeah, of a pirate ship there. So Reese's Retreat is really neat in that it was designed as a fully accessible park with, as you can see, a particular type of play surface that is the most accessible for people with disabilities,
So
particularly.
that's not sand. I see blue, it's not blue sand.
Right, it's called poured in place, and it's also not bark, and so that makes it the surface is more accessible for people with disabilities, particularly those who use mobility devices. And in the process of designing the park, the disability community was engaged in the conversation about what they wanted it to look like. So you can even see a ramp there, pictured through the middle of the screen, so that the different play components are accessible at different levels.
And actually, the Reese's Retreat is too big for one or even 2 photographs. There's a second photograph that we have to show that shows the swing set. That's just off to the side of the previous photograph.
Great. Yeah, and there you can see
Now,
that
why do we have different kinds of swings there?
different types of swings to meet different needs, and then also if you see that both types of swings are available on that accessible play surface.
Okay, and that's the blue surface.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we got Robinson Park, brand new, meets the requirements of the ADA. We've got Reese's Retreat going above and beyond. Now, how about let's get to services. What kinds of issues do we have with services in the city of Pasadena?
As far as access to services?
Oh, I forgot. Reese, Wheelchair Boy. Viewers, I'm very apologetic. Wheelchair Boy actually has a question.
All right.
For Ali, and we were unable to mic him because he's so small, but so he wrote down the question, so I'm going to read his question for you. Reese's Retreat, Wheelchair Boy wanted to know if Reese's Retreat is exclusively for children with disabilities, and is there a limitation on the number of friends without disabilities he can bring to the park, to the play
That's
area?
a really excellent question, Wheelchair Boy. The park is inclusive for all children, those with and without disabilities, so you can bring as many friends as you would like to the park at any time as long as the park is open.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure Wheelchair Boy thanks you. And I'd like to take a moment to point out to our viewers, it's a little bit of etiquette in speaking to a person who is either cannot speak or is deaf. And I think you did it perfectly, Ali, because the natural human nature, you would want to speak to me since I read the question. But it's actually Wheelchair Boy's question, so you faced him and you spoke directly to him. And you didn't say, tell Wheelchair Boy, et cetera, et cetera. So many people, when they're talking to a deaf person through a sign interpreter, will say, well, tell him or her this. And you just not supposed to say that. You're just supposed to speak, look at the deaf person, speak naturally, and the sign interpreter will interpret. Okay, so let's move on to services. Give us an example of, well, actually, no, just before we get to that, there's an issue of altered buildings, okay? Sometimes the city alters its facilities, and they're supposed to meet accessibility standards for that. Can you give us
Correct.
an example or two of that?
Yes, whenever an alteration to a facility affects the usability of that facility, then the components that are affected, where the usability is affected, have to be brought up to current standards to the maximum extent feasible. So a really great example of that with the city is the seismic retrofit of City Hall, during which there were accessibility upgrades to various components, but specifically the elevator that serves the council chambers was enlarged in order to meet the ADA requirements. And then
I think we have a photograph
yeah.
of that to show our viewers. The accessible elevator, there it is. I remember for many years, the old elevator was so small, sometimes I would just go in backwards and have someone press the button for me.
Well, it sounds like it was a good upgrade to do as part of the seismic retrofit. And then one of the other really key upgrades, which has been a great asset to City Hall, is the ramp on the west side of the building, so that there is now an accessible entrance on both the west and the east side, which are frequently used by the community, both sides.
Okay, and our viewers can now look at a photo of that ramp with the accessibility entrance sign right there in front.
Yeah.
And this sort of complements the City Hall ramp on the Euclid side of City Hall, which was built some years ago and was always referred to as the backside ramp.
Yeah.
So now we have the front side ramp so people can enter City Hall from either direction.
Yeah, and I think that ramp is a great example of how accessibility can also contribute to universal design, because I have seen delivery people use the ramp, families with strollers, and various other reasons why that ramp is a better resource than the stairs.
Okay, very good. Great illustration of what I sometimes say to people, that accessibility is like milk. It's good for everybody.
Fair enough.
Now, since the city doesn't build very many new buildings, it's got a lot of other older buildings that it renovates. So do you get involved in all of the renovations? Do they run the plans by you?
I do my very best to be involved with all components that are accessibility related to make sure that they're integrated as a part of the project.
Okay, very good. Okay, finally we can move to services, which is in the name of the title, Title 2A, Public Services. Have there been issues, accessible issues with city services? Can you give us some examples of issues?
Sure. I think the best illustration of the city providing its services, programs, and activities in compliance with the ADA is the provision of auxiliary aids and modifications to policies and procedures in order to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. So really great examples of those are providing our publications in alternative formats such as Braille, and also doing individualized support plans for youth participants in our recreation activities. What's really important to
You've got disabled youth in our recreation
we
programs?
do have youth with disabilities in our recreation programs. We are happy to have youth with disabilities in our recreation programs. I think it's just really important to.
And Alex, sorry to interrupt, but I think did you say IDP? Did you use the abbreviation IDP, or you said for the youth in the recreation programs?
No.
Okay, I thought you said you help prepare some sort of.
So we'll
documents.
do an individualized support plan.
Okay.
And depending on the needs of the individual.
Okay.
So
I'm sure many of our viewers who have school-age disabled
Yeah.
children with disabilities are probably familiar with IDP.
IEPs,
for schools, IEPs
yeah.
for schools. This is something different.
Right, so because we're not a school, we don't do an individualized education plan, but what we'll do is meet with the family and the individual to try to better understand what we can do to support them to have an equal opportunity to participate in our recreation programs.
Okay.
And that will vary based on the individual and the nature of the program itself. Ultimately, it usually results in a written plan with strategies to support the individual, so in that respect, it's similar to an IEP, but also very different,
Okay.
because a recreation setting is different than
I had no
an
idea that
education
the city
setting.
was taking such a hands-on approach to this matter. Are you the hands that takes the hands-on approach?
Myself and the staff who work in the recreation
Okay.
department. And in fact, we call it inclusion services, and it's available for anybody with a disability in the recreation programs. We just find that the youth, it's used more often in our youth programs, after
okay.
school and summer camp.
Okay. Now you're going to mention some other examples, but let me go back to something that went by kind of quickly. Alternative formats. You mentioned
Correct.
Braille. The city can do Braille.
We have a Braille printer, so that we can print documents in Braille, yes.
Okay. And how does someone who is blind or needs a Braille document, who do they contact? Who do they?
That's a really great question. My recommendation is actually to make that request through the Pasadena Citizen Service Center. They're welcome to contact me directly at my phone. I think you're going to put up my phone
Yeah, we'll
and
put
email.
up the information in near the end of our
Yeah.
discussion here.
So you
we're going to put it up right now, I guess.
Okay,
The
there you
higher
go.
authorities made a decision.
So you can contact me directly, but also you see on the screen there the Citizen Service Center. What's great about the Citizen Service Center is that it actually is really a wonderful example of being fully accessible, because you can contact the Citizen Service Center via various forms of communication. So you can place a phone call, you can send an email, you can do a live chat through the city's website, or use the phone app that's available for Android and iPhone. And under those, in the Citizen Service Center, we've built out an accessibility portion, and there's actually a topic for requesting a reasonable modification or an auxiliary aid. So that's a really simple way to contact a number that somebody's always available to answer, or send an email that will be responded to quickly to make your request for whatever document you may need in the alternative format you need it in. Again, you can also contact me directly, but that's another method to submit that request.
Okay. I can attest that I've used the Citizen Service Center, and when you go to the website, there's a list of possible topics, and guess which one is on the top alphabetically? Accessibility.
Yep.
Okay. Did you arrange that?
I did.
Okay, very good.
We're actually pretty excited about that service to the community. I've talked about it with a lot of my colleagues who are ADA coordinators in other cities, and so I know a few of them are looking at replicating that option for their communities as well.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that Pasadena can lead in this field. Any other examples of services that are where there's sometimes some issues?
I think really it comes down to the individualized needs of the person with a disability, and so we'll respond as needed individually to those requests. And because we have such a vast array of services, it's hard to anticipate what those might be. Obviously, transportation is really important, so we offer Pasadena Dial-A-Ride as the complementary paratransit to our public transportation services. So that's a really great example of a service that's available for people with disabilities in our community.
Okay. Now, in my mind, one of the most important services that a municipal government provides is information. We talked a little bit about written information in alternative formats, but I'm thinking of all the meetings, all the forums, all the public discussions that go on that the city is responsible for. There must be some accessibility issues there that might need attention.
Of course. So we would hold those meetings in physically accessible locations and include an opportunity for members of the public to request modifications or other auxiliary aid as needed for that meeting.
Okay. All right. Let me move on. Let me put on my other glasses so I can read the next question here. Are there any hot issues that you're working on currently that we haven't mentioned?
That is a fun question to answer.
Well, I'm glad we have some fun.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there's accessibility touches all parts of the city, and so there's lots of issues to work on, but one of the ones that we've been working on a lot lately is inclusive emergency management. So about a year ago, we formed the Access and Functional Needs Work Group that's comprised of city staff as well as stakeholders from the community that are people with disabilities or connected to the disability community in some way. That gets together to provide feedback on the accessibility of the city's emergency plans. So we recently had the opportunity to do that with the Public Health Department's plans for medical points of dispensing, otherwise known as MPODs.
MPODs.
And that would be activated in a public health emergency. So the Access and Functional Needs Work Group reviewed the Public Health Department's plans for the MPOD, provided some really great recommendations on considerations to incorporate into those plans, and then we were actually able to exercise it the following week with an MPOD exercise and do some evaluations and observations to provide feedback.
At this point in time, can you reveal just very briefly what people would experience in a health emergency with an MPOD? Is an MPOD a location?
Right. So in that particular,
it's not on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the exercise that we conducted, they used the flu vaccination clinic as the exercise. So that was actually going to Robinson Park, which is now
fully accessible.
And receiving a flu vaccination. So you would go to a location and receive some sort of vaccination specific to the public health emergency. There's various different formats that may take. And so considerations for people with disabilities are making sure that they have an accessible entrance, offering a quiet room to be able to receive the vaccination because the primary room might be loud and bright and busy, and a few other important components that the Access and Functional Needs Work Group helped us identify.
Okay. It sounds like a lot has been achieved in Pasadena to comply with the Title IIA public services. So are you about to work your way out of a job? Is everything going to be finished in a few months or a year or so?
Well, that's my ultimate goal. No, we are not there yet. Accessibility, best practices and standards can change over time in response to changing technology. And Pasadena has a lot of projects and programs that will come up new or have been going on for a long time. And there's always an accessibility discussion and component to have as a part of that as time evolves and technology evolves and the programs and services change over time.
And of course, every time a building is renovated or altered, there may be some accessibility issues to include in that alteration.
Of course. So I always like to be able to be a part of those conversations to make sure that we are incorporating accessibility into the plan from the beginning.
Okay. Well, let's go finally. Final question is to sort of repeat something we had earlier up on the television screen. How best to contact the city in order to get information, ask questions, make a complaint, perhaps. If we could see that slide again of the contact information for Ali.
Yeah,
and Citizen Service Center?
I can be reached at 744-4782 or my first initial and last name, A. Everett, at cityofpasadena.net. And then the Citizen Service Center is available at 744-7311, or through the city's website. On the homepage, there's a direct link, and you can actually email the Citizen Service Center at csc@cityofpasadena.net.
Okay. Now, I'd like to repeat a remark I made at the start of the program. I said it wasn't enough just to say a city is obligated to achieve accessibility or to hold the mayor responsible. A city needs an accessibility coordinator, person who is there on a day-to-day basis to promote, to inform, to explain, to needle. Do you do any needling?
None at all.
Oh, come on.
No needling at all.
At least not in public, right? Nothing that you can admit to. But you do work to bring people together to work cooperatively.
Yes.
To achieve better accessibility. To Ali Everett, accessibility issues of the City of Pasadena, I greatly appreciate your time and your willingness to help inform our viewers about a small but truly vital piece of the ADA. From today's program, I hope that viewers, when you desire information about accessibility and the municipal government of the City of Pasadena, you will think of today's keyword, once again, accessibility coordinator, and remember that you can contact Ali Everett or the Citizen Service Center by phone or email. Now, most likely, there was a lot of information on that slide, maybe too much for you to copy down. So you can always contact this program by its email address, accessforall@yahoo.com. And the Access for All team of Wheelchair Boy, Stone of Truth, and I will be happy to provide that information and also to answer any comments or questions that you have about the ADA. Be sure to tell your friends, neighbors, and others about Access for All. Everyone should be interested in the Americans with Disabilities Act because hardly anyone ever goes through life without a permanent or temporary experience with disability. In fact, it's appropriate to refer to people who do not have a disability today as temporarily able-bodied, TAB, TAB for short. Until the next program, I, and I think also Ali, wish all people with disabilities and all TABs well, and let's look forward to the day when the Pledge of Allegiance ends with liberty, justice, and access for all.
Is your business having difficulty filling vacant positions, especially entry level? Pasadena Civitan is a community group promoting the employment of people with disabilities. Hello, my name is Chancey and I'm a Pasadena Civitan member. Job developers like me help people with disabilities find jobs, and we want to assist your business to succeed. We have diverse candidates with the abilities you are looking for. For more information about our Pasadena Civitan and our employment programs, email pasadenacivitan@gmail.com. Thank you.